Hi BookTube, this is Leo from the channel A Little Book Life. Recently I read my second China Mieville novel, The Scar, in Dutch translated as Armada. It was a buddy read with Dan from the Weird Book Club, and let me tell you, he is a wonderful buddy reader who really invests his time and effort in reading together, and I had a wonderful time reading together with him. The Scar is the second installment of 3 novels that are set in the same world. They are only very loosely connected, so they can be read as standalones without having read the other ones. Since both Dan and I were very impressed by the first book of the series, Perdido Street Station, we decided to read the second one, and we were not disappointed at all. China Mieville calls himself a writer of weird fiction, and he is connected to a group of writers who call themselves the New Weird. That told, let that not scare you off, though, because the weird of China Mieville's writing is not in the style or the plot or the structure. It is very, very readable. It is in the world he describes, specifically in its inhabitants. Next to humans exists the oddest kinds of creatures, half human, half insect, or fish-like beings, and beings who are, as a way of punishment for committed crimes, surgically altered into creatures that are, for example, half human and half machine. When reading my first China Mieville, Perdido Street Station, I was flabbergasted when I encountered these weird creatures for the first time. But Mieville handles his writing about his characters in such a way that within no time you accept them as perfectly normal and utterly believable. He does that without elaborate description of them, which shows his great craftsmanship. The Scar tells the story of Bas-Lag, a woman who has to escape the city where she has lived all her life and to which she is very attached. She flees on a ship bound for a distant island of settlers, but the ship gets hijacked and is taken to Armada, which is a huge floating city on the sea that is in fact made of hundreds, maybe thousands of boats that are tied together and thus form the floor on which the city is built. Mieville clearly loves huge and complex cities because the city of New Crobizon, that is central in Perdido Street Station, is also huge. In a way, New Crobizon and Armada are characters in themselves. Bas-Lag desperately wants to escape from there and eventually go back to her home city. After all, she is more and more homesick. So, despite the fact that she has fled the city, she is longing for it so much that she wants to go back. But that's a very hard thing to do when you're on a floating city in a vast ocean and you have not the means to go. The longer she stays on Armada, the more she is caught up in the machinations of the leaders who search for the most power they can find on the planet. This is a story that slowly develops. Like Perdido Street Station, it is very much character-driven in the first part. In the second half, the action really takes off, and the tension slowly builds up in a magnificent way that keeps you turning the pages. But the slow start is by no means a negative thing. Mieville's story is never boring, it never sags, and the way he writes from the inside of the characters' minds shows his excellent craftsmanship. And when the action finally takes off, it is horrifying and leaves you on the tip of your chair. And there are characters and creatures that you'll not easily forget. And Mieville does not shy away from sex scenes, like many fantasy writers do. And they are never cheap, but they are realistic, sometimes weird and clumsy, but always functional to the story. There are interesting things to learn from this book. For one, the philosophy of Armada. When crimes are committed or hostages from foreign ships are taken, there is always place for forgiveness in the end and redemption. In fact, the society of Armada is built upon it, thus ensuring a high grade of loyalty among the citizens of Armada. Mieville's world building is fabulous, original and very convincing. The characters are weird, but utterly believable. This is no light fantasy, surely no typical questy Lord of the Rings-like fantasy. And not the easiest of reads, but highly awarding. The writing is excellent, and the story never sags. Dan and I are fans of Mieville and are already planning our buddy read for the third installment in this series. If you like reading a fantasy novel, and you want to read something totally different and still believable, then you are in for a treat with China Mieville.
Oh, hi Weirdos! Dan Rossbach here, your lead discussant at the Weird Book Club. Or rather, today I should say co-lead discussant. Thanks to Leo for being such a great buddy, and also for providing that excellent introduction to the works of China Mieville and the utterly unique world he's created in his series of Bas-Lag novels. Now, in addition to all of the excellent qualities that have been mentioned so far, I have to say that reading the Scar was rewarding for me in another way, one that for me was totally unexpected. It helped me to overcome one of my biggest literary prejudices. I fucking hate boats. Rowboats and galleons, steamships and trawlers, let them all be crushed against the unyielding glacier of my indifference and cast down into the furthest, darkest depths of our collective consciousness. Nothing will make me abandon a book more quickly than an author expecting me to know or care about obscure boat terminology. You can take your yawls and your mizzenmasts and shove them right up your aft. Now, you'd expect a book that centers around an entire city composed of literally thousands of boats to send me running off into the hills where no boat can follow. But, fellow Navaphobes, I'm happy to report that I was able to both complete and enjoy this 570-page maritime epic, all while remaining perfectly, blissfully ignorant of whatever the fuck a fore-top-mast staysail is. That, I think, is a tribute to the vividness of Mieville's writing style. He's able to make characters and the societies they inhabit feel fully realized without ever getting bogged down in technical details. It feels fitting, too, that in describing a sea-bound society where no resource is wasted, Mieville would employ a similarly economical prose style. In a literary landscape that's come to fetishize world building, especially in the realm of popular science fiction and fantasy series, it's refreshing to encounter a story that feels both grand and purposeful. This quality became particularly clear to me in the book's epic battle scenes, which, instead of delivering a plotting blow-by-blow account of each phase of the conflict, just smacks you upside the head with these intense, impressionistic scenes, where we get to experience pivotal moments of heroism and trauma from every possible vantage point. While one character observes the battle with detached horror from the elevated deck of Armada's flagship, another is swimming below the city, dodging its sinking debris, and literally filtering the blood of its fallen citizens through his gills. All this is to say that I fully endorse Leo's earlier point that plot and pacing in the Scar are supremely well done. All the more so because Mieville is able to use them to present the reader with these big, open-ended philosophical questions about the purpose of community and what one individual can and should contribute to it. Throughout the novel, in 100 subtle and not-so-subtle ways, we find our attention being drawn to the various engines and incentives that are driving Armada forward. In its most literal sense, from the moment of our main character's arrival, Armada is a city on a mission, always moving towards some mysterious objective or another, as the dominant political faction of the society pursues its quest for ultimate power. The resources required to haul this aquatic city across an entire ocean are massive, both in terms of tangible goods like food and fuel, and also more abstractly, political buy-in from the general population. Without their tacit support, their daily labor, the entire operation would be unable to move forward. And as we're introduced to the political dynamics of this society through the eyes of our narrator, Bellis Coldwine, it becomes increasingly clear that campaigning and propaganda from the city's leadership are what's really setting Armada's course throughout these treacherous waters. We also start to see some fractures in this societal consensus. People who seem uneasy with the idea that Armada has become essentially a mission-oriented community. Having existed for hundreds of years with the simple goal of sustaining itself, Armada is now on an epic quest to acquire something I won't spoil for you. Anyone who's read enough Tolkien or ancient mythology or any of those Joseph Campbell-style hero narratives knows where this sort of story arc leads. When the mission is accomplished, the Fellowship disbands. And maybe that's a price too dear to pay. Maybe society should be viewed as a goal in itself. The perpetual creation of a space in which certain identities, values, and perspectives can flourish. After all, the core of Armada's material strength, its guiding communal ethic, is its ability to integrate and provide purpose to people who, in other societies, would be considered worthless, subhuman. This is a tough pill to swallow for our main character, who, on one hand, slowly discovers that the quest that they've embarked on is so insane, so beyond human comprehension, that no one could knowingly consent to it. And on the other hand, the alternative, this whole kumbaya community thing, that feels to her almost like another form of death, allowing her individual needs and desires to dissolve into those murky waters that we call the common good. Collectivism has its costs as well. It's common in discussing books like this, where a setting and its population are so central to the plot, to say that the city is really a main character. But rarely has this felt more accurate to me than in The Scar. Our main character, Bellis, is extremely intelligent, uniquely skilled, and often hilariously antisocial. But at the end of the day, she's a citizen of Armada, not its hero. Some of the most emotionally profound moments of this novel occur when she's forced to recognize just how little understanding and agency she has when it comes to influencing the outcomes of all the schemes that are swirling around her. And yet, her actions do carry serious consequences, both fantastic and terrible. Her background being in linguistics, Bellis's main role in the grand adventure-y portion of the novel is as an interpreter. She's repeatedly instructed by her superiors not to play an active role in any of their discussions. Don't alter any of the expressions that are used. Don't even consciously consider the content of the conversation. You are purely a Google Translate style language filter. Even as she seems to be in such a privileged position, so close to the heart of the action, we're reminded that Bellis is still acting as a sort of conduit for other people's thoughts and intentions. If Mieville has accomplished one truly genius subversion of the classic fantasy epic with this book, I think it's this, forcing us to recognize that there really are no chosen ones who are fated to restore the world to its proper order. There are just people, socially connected, interdependent, whose capacity to accomplish great things is derived largely from the power that others invest in them. Whether that's personal trust, professional respect, political loyalty, whatever. We're conduits for the will of others, interpreters, an inflection point where their beliefs and desires can take on new and unexpected forms. Or more cynically, you could say that we're all basically just pawns in the machinations of larger social forces that we'll never fully comprehend. But if true definitive comprehension is always beyond our grasp, perhaps interpretation is still enough to sustain us. In the end, there's no hero's reward to justify all the trauma that Bellis has endured throughout the narrative. There are only her scars, lasting marks of what's been done to her and through her. And only by continuing to live does she get to decide what those wounds mean. Dan, stop! It's me! I'm you from like another alternate timeline or something. Oh my god, that's incredible. I have so many things that I want to ask. No. Shut up. I specifically crossed over to this timeline to stop you from embarrassing yourself on the internet. Everyone gets really bored when you start spouting off some kind of philosophical nonsense at the end of your videos. You just ramble on and move your hands all weird like this. I'm too late, aren't I? I mean, I thought that was a pretty cool point about interpretation, and I was just about to say how we as readers get to do the same thing with the books that we love. It's all over. This reality has become corrupted. He actually believes there's such a thing as a cool point. I know what I need to do. Don't worry, BookTube. The bad man can't hurt you anymore. As always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments down below. Until next time, happy reading, weirdos.